Up in the Indian Himalayas, there's this tiny, incredibly remote lake that's hiding a pretty chilling secret. You see, for centuries, it's been the final resting place for hundreds of human skeletons. Today, we're going to try to unravel the incredible mystery of Roopkund, better known as Skeleton Lake.
So this is the central puzzle, right? The big question that's been bugging scientists, historians, and locals for decades. What we're really looking at is an ancient crime scene, just frozen in time. The question seems simple enough, but as you're about to find out, the answers are anything but.
To really get this story, you have to picture just how isolated this place is. We're talking over 16,000 feet above sea level. It's wild. For most of the year, the whole lake is just a solid block of ice and snow. It's only for a little while in the summer, when things melt, that the bones reappear. It's a seriously haunting sight.
Now, people who lived nearby had known about the bones for a long time, but the site was only officially rediscovered, you could say, by the wider world in 1942. A forest ranger, H.K. Mathwall, was just on patrol when he stumbled across this gruesome scene. And that's what brought global attention to the mystery for the first time.
Okay, so with no obvious scientific answers, where do you turn? You turn to stories, to legends that have been passed down for generations, and the most powerful explanation for the skeletons came straight from local folklore.
So the story goes something like this. There was a king, Jasdaval, who was traveling on a pilgrimage to honor the mountain goddess Nanda Devi. But he and his followers were apparently being really loud and disrespectful, and they made the goddess furious. As punishment, she sent down this apocalyptic storm, raining hailstones as hard as iron that killed the entire party, just like that.
Of course, the legend wasn't the only idea floating around. People speculated wildly for years. Maybe it was an army that got lost, or Japanese soldiers from World War II trying to invade. What about a sudden plague, or even some kind of mass ritual? But honestly, none of those theories really held water, and that hailstorm legend, it just remained the most compelling story.
And this, right here, is where our detective story gets really interesting. For the longest time, the legend was all anyone had. But then, scientists started to look at the bones themselves, searching for the first real forensic clues.
And what's crazy is that the very first forensic evidence seemed to support the legend. A lot of the skulls had these short, deep cracks in them. This wasn't damage from a sword or a spear. This was blunt force trauma, the kind you get from being hit by something big and round from directly above. You know, like giant hailstones.
So, case closed, right? The legend was true. Well, not so fast. Just when it seemed like a perfect fit, radiocarbon dating came along and threw a massive wrench in the works. The science showed that not all the bones were from the same time period. In fact, they came from at least two different groups who died 1,000 years apart. That's the key. This couldn't have been one single event like the legend said.
The story was already getting complicated. But then, in 2019, this groundbreaking study using ancient DNA analysis just completely blew the case wide open. And what it revealed? Well, it was more astonishing than anyone could have possibly imagined.
Yeah, so an international team did something that would have been total science fiction just a few years ago. They actually managed to extract and sequence ancient DNA from 38 of the skeletons. This tech is like a biological time machine. It lets us read a person's entire genetic history from just a tiny piece of bone. And it uncovered a story that was way more complex and global than any legend.
Okay, so here's the big reveal. This is the part that just blows everyone's mind. A lot of the individuals had South Asian ancestry, which, makes sense. But the DNA showed another totally separate group whose genetic markers came from the Eastern Mediterranean. We're talking modern-day Greece and Crete. A third little group even had Southeast Asian ancestry. This was a complete shock. No one saw this coming. So combining the DNA with the dating, scientists could build a clear timeline. And it revealed at least two completely separate events. The first happened around the 9th century, and it involved people of South Asian ancestry. But the second one, with the group from the Mediterranean, happened a full 1,000 years later, around the 19th century. They weren't one group, they never even met. And that is the new mystery of Roopkund. The old question, what happened to the pilgrims, that's gone. It's been replaced by something way more bizarre. What on earth was a group of people from the Mediterranean doing in one of the most inaccessible places on the planet? And how did they all die there?
So where does that leave us?
Well, the simple legend has been totally shattered by science. But instead of getting a neat and tidy answer, we're left with a puzzle about our past that's honestly so much more fascinating.
The scientists are now kicking around all these new possibilities. Could those Mediterranean folks have been part of some pilgrimage? Or were these just two totally unrelated tragic accidents that happened 1,000 years apart in the same spot? Maybe it's even evidence of some long-distance trade route we never knew existed. The honest answer? No one knows for sure. Not yet.
And we really have to talk about something important here. Roopkund is an incredibly fragile site. Its fame has turned it into a popular trekking spot, and that's putting the remains at risk. People are disturbing the bones, even taking them as souvenirs. If we ever want to solve the mysteries this place still holds, we absolutely have to protect it.
And really, this is why Roopkund is so important. It's the perfect example of how science doesn't always just give us simple answers. Sometimes new tools like ancient DNA completely rewrite the stories we tell about ourselves. It shows us that human history isn't just a bunch of separate stories. It's this complex, incredible web of movement and connection.
And that pretty much sums it all up, doesn't it? The mystery of Skeleton Lake isn't about finding one easy solution. It's about how every new piece of information makes us ask deeper, more fascinating questions about who we are, where we came from, and how we're all connected.